In this video, we are going to talk how we can make an HTTP API calls from an Angular application. So in this, we are going to talk about the HTTP modules and how to import that and how they can use to make API calls from an Angular application. Hey everyone, this is Kamran and I'm a full stack web developer. And in this video series, I'm teaching Angular JS to all the beginners. And if you are new here, I would suggest you to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell as well. That will help you to get the all new Angular JS and other web framework videos on your feed. So in this last video, we talked and created category, subcategory and the product of our application, but in those components we were using some static data, right? That data we have stored in the one of the file in our application itself, but now we are going to move that data from the file to an API. So we have already created an API for the e-commerce backend in our Express.js tutorial, and if you have missed it, that I would recommend you to go to that video first. You will get an idea, or else if you know how Express.js application or APIs are made, then you can continue on this video. So I'm running that server, backend server as well, so that I can make an API call to that server, and you can use the same setup, or else you can use some dummy APIs to make the API call. So let's start making an API call. The first thing which we have to do is to import our HTTP module in our main module. What is the main module file? So in this source folder, in our main app folder, we have this app module, right? So we have to import our HTTP module over here. And from that module, we can use the HTTP service. So let's import our HTTP client first. For that, I'm going to write import HTTP client module. And this we are going to get from the Angular common HTTP folder. So let's use the Angular/common/HTTP. And once we import this, we have to add this in our imports. Let's do this. So this will help to import this HTTP client in all other modules as well. Now we have this HTTP client module. Now we can move to the component where we want to make an HTTP call, right? So let's open our module, which will be the user and category. And in this category component, I'm going to make that API call. This API call, I'm going to make it through a service. So let's talk about how we are going to keep our folder structure when we are going to make an API call. So now I'm going to create a service for this particular component, and all the APIs call which we want to make for this component, I'm going to make in that service. So let's first create a service in the service folder and then try to make a HTTP call from that service. And to create a service, we will go to our command prompt first. And from here, I'm going to create a new service, which will be generate service, and service we have to create in our services folder, right? And this folder structure we have already discussed in the previous videos. So let's do according to that. And in this, I'm going to create a category service. And as we know that for services, we have to define the folder as well as the file, right? So I'm going to do that and do enter. So this will create a category service for me. And we are going to make all the APIs which are related to the category in this file. And similarly for subcategory and for the product, we are going to create a separate service file. So let's do some coding inside this service. Before that, I will serve my application. So in this services, we can see we have this new category service. So in this service, I'm going to make an API call. So for that, I will need a package for HTTP client. So let's import that. And this HTTP client, we have to import from the same folder, which is Angular common HTTP. So let's import that HTTP client. And this will be imported from Angular common/HTTP. Now I'm going to inject this HTTP client in our service. So let's do that. Private, and HTTP client will be HTTP client, and this will be there. So I can change this to small h. Now let's create a separate function to get the category list. For that, I'm going to create a new function over here, get category list. And this function will accept no parameters. So in this function, first I'm going to create a variable for the URL. So my API URL, and this will be my API, and that will be my localhost 5000/category/list which I have already created in the Express.js series. So you have to keep in mind that you have to replace this API URL value with your API. And now I'm going to make that API. So we have to return from this function this dot HTTP client dot, and we have to make a get call. So we are going to use get. And in this get, we are just simply going to pass the URL, and that's it. This function will simply return the response of this HTTP call. Now we are going to use this service to make this API call or call this function from our component. Let's do that. So for this, I'm going to import our service in this. So we are going to just simply import our category service, category slash category service, and this will be our category service. And I'm going to inject similar to data service. Let's add a comma over here, and this will also be a private, and then I can just simply add this category service. I will just move this to small category. Now let's try to call our get category list API. So I will create a new function over here, get categories, and this in this function I'm just simply going to call this service method, right? So do that dot category dot service dot get category list, and this will be an empty. And now I'm going to subscribe to this so that when I'm going to get the data in this, I will get that data over here. And now we have already covered this calling these services. So we are just simply going to call both the functions next and our error, right? So in the error, I'm going to call a function. We will just print out the error, and that will be a simple function which will just log the error. And in this next function, I'm going to update the data in the category variable. So we have to remove this category data. So I'm going to remove this or comment out this category data, and instead of that, by default, I will keep it as empty or array. And then when I'm going to get the data from this API, I'm going to update that in this categories. So let's first log the data, and then let's update this categories with this data. So we have to define the data type, which I'm defining any for now. So now we have to call this function, which I will be calling from our ng on it, because we have to call this function on the load of this component. So let's do that. And once we do this, we will see that the category has been updated. But we have to keep in mind that with the response of the data, it will be data.data. This will be not for every case. You may have a different data structure. You can just log it out and see the data and then update your variable according to it. And I know that I am sending the data inside an object whose key is data. So that's why I'm using this data.data. Or instead of this data, we can use response. So response will have a data which I am going to update in our categories. So if I go to our category page, I can see that I have two categories over here. Images are empty because we are not storing any image URL on the backend. So you can update that image URL to any object URL or your own data. So I hope you understood how you can make a get API call from an Angular application using HTTP module. And similarly, we are going to cover the post API in the next video, which is very much similar to the get API itself. So till that, keep practicing the HTTP get API. Happy coding everyone. See you in the next video.